Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto neglected by family sent to Final Fantasy. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Psudocode Samurai and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Harbinger. The great man once said that the only two things that are infinite were the universe and human stupidity. And he wasn't sure about the universe. However, there is one more thing that I know of that is infinite, and that, dear readers, is darkness, the shadow, nothingness, void. Many will say that without light there is no dark and that the opposite is true. However, when there simply is nothing left, it will be dark and it will be cold. Nothingness will come from something, however, something will never come from nothingness, from a true void. And for one Naruto Uzumaki, who was currently plummeting to his death, this was the cold realization that gripped his soul. That as he fell, clawing impotently at the walls and the light faded, that he was losing himself. A sharp blow to the lower back sent lights dancing in the back of his eyes as he now tumbled. For a brief second now and again he saw the slowly shrinking sky, a brief glimpse of white hair, then another blow, launching him off the wall and causing shattered limbs to tangle. As the last vestiges of consciousness faded, he could only curse the old fool who had decided to train him, the pervert squandering his time trying to get him to summon toads, something he honestly didn't care 1 ounce about using, now when he was up against Neji. The bastard. His thought swam as he tried to think about who the bastard really was here. Jiraiya. That went without saying. Ibisu. Not as much, yes, the man hated him, but he also didn't know him at all, but fool was a closet pervert, so if anything the man and Toad Boy would get along. Kakashi. Maybe the king of bastards, no, a fucking bastard. After seeing what the other genin were capable of in the first and second parts of the exam, he had some to realize just how little the man had taught them. Tree climbing. That was nothing compared to fuzzy brows when he fought Sasuke. Team building. With a team that wanted nothing to do with him and made fun of him at every moment. Hell, even the lazy ass Shika got along better with his teammates than he did. The old man may be not a bastard, but when he saw how some of the other orphans had it compared to him, he was bitter. His own place was falling apart when he first got it, and even still the power would work maybe half the time, to say nothing of the hot water. Could the Hokage control that? Be blamed for it? Not directly, but he could have made sure it was taken care of if the man had bothered to drop in more than once a year to check up on him. He paid the damn rent after all. One would think that he would have checked up on the things that he had complained about on their yearly ramen outing, or the times he had been dragged to the office after a prank. Still, there was nothing for it now. He couldn't move his hands anymore, his thoughts were lost in the past, trying so desperately to think of the girl he liked, only to see, plain as day, how much she hated him. Funny the level of clarity that one can attain at the end of everything. With one last bitter chuckle at it all, the sound marred by a gout of blood from a badly damaged body, Naruto fell into nothingness. Even as he was consumed by it. Come on brat, where are you? Seconds passed, a small, smug smile on his face as he awaited his apprentice's appearance. By any second now, 5 minutes had passed. And for one sex-obsessed sage a cold feeling began to settle in the pit of his stomach. A dull, nervous laugh filled the clearing surrounding the crevasse. Okay kid, you've had your fun, come on up. 8 hours had now passed, and the only figure to be seen in the lights of village was one old man, kneeling on the ground while weeping into his hands. You, what? Who? Who's there? I can't see. What are you? Naruto. Thousands of voices seemed to chatter in the darkness, that answer is primal. Alien. Immaterial. What are you? A ninja. Immaterial. What are you? Human? Again, the voices erupted. Why? How? When? A shaky, scared voice answered, I was falling my sen, someone threw me off a cliff. I hit the sides, now I'm here. Where am I? Nowhere. Everywhere. You do not exist. You are everything. You are nothing. How can I get out? Silence was his answer. Jiraiya had stayed by the crevasse for 2 days, simply curled into the fetal position as he silently reviewed his life, his mistakes. Though, upon his own reflection, it was a bit hard to think of Naruto as the biggest mistake he had made, though it was one of the ones he regretted the most. First, was his failed attempt at a relationship with Tsunade. His persistence had been his undoing. Then it was the 3 children he had taken under his wing, and yet had abandoned. Not a day went by that he didn't regret his decision to leave them. Next to Minato, they were the closest things to children he had ever had. He only wished he had been strong enough to deal with Hanzo, maybe then. But Naruto was in a class in of itself. He had read the reports, abandoned by the village that he saved every day he drew breath, kicked out of the orphanage, sabotaged at school, placed on a team that hated him, and what did he do? Travel the elemental nations to keep his network up to date. That thought never brought him much warmth. Maybe that's why he drank, why he was with those women night after night. It certainly helped keep that face from his mind. But now he wondered if it would ever leave him. That smile, the pout, that haunting sadness when he had told the blonde that he had spoken to Kakashi and would be taking over his training. And what had he trained him in? An art that he had forced the blonde to swear not to use in the finals. So then how was he training him, and why his own obsession with getting Naruto to use the fox's chakra? Was it the stories from Kumo? Did he feel that a boy, one who was half the age of the other containers, needed to be able to wield that awesome power? Maybe it was the Suna container who he knew was in the finals. Then again, maybe if he had told the blonde these things he would have been better motivated and he wouldn't have had to. A sudden flux of chakra sent the hairs on the Senin's neck to rise, one of the telltale signs of the incoming body flicker. Jiraiya, where is Naruto? The Toad Sage could only whimper as he looked up at his old sensei, if he thought he was suffering now. Naruto felt like he'd been wondering for ages, it had taken him some time to finally be able to see, and when he did he almost wished he was back in that darkness. The world before him was in a word terrifying. The world was his own, that much he knew, but at the same time, it wasn't, and there was no way that you could force yourself into thinking that it was. The sky was black as pitch, no stars visible, and that never changed. The world around him seemed washed out, muted. There was no true color, just blacks and grays. At first he was next to, who he thought, was Jiraiya, but when he got too close the figure attacked, and no matter how he called out the figure stayed kneeling by the gorge, mumbling in a way he couldn't understand. Moving towards the village was no better, more of the figures, more of the odd language, but if he got close he was lashed out at, but the strangest thing was when he went to the edge of the village and looked out there was simply nothing. Nothing but swirling mists that held things that immediately drove him back into the village by fear alone. That cold, the desolation. In desperation he called out to the voices again, but he heard nothing, and the longer he stayed here the more he felt like he was fading. A few things were becoming obvious to him. First, he should have been hungry, starving, but he felt nothing but a dull cold. He should be longing for the sun, but if anything he felt more comfortable in the slightly dimmer shadows. Then he spotted it, or rather he couldn't spot it. His own shadow was simply gone. What the hell is going on? Sarutobi could only stand still, blinking owlishly at the man groveling at his feet. You threw him off a cliff. Why yes. Normally kind brown eyes became hard as steel, and what in Kami's wondrous earth possessed you to throw Naruto into the endless chasm? I was trying to get him to access the Fox's Sea. Suddenly Jiraiya felt himself crushed under the weight of his sensei's killing intent, visions of his own painful end dashing through mind, though if anything these images were comfort, a way out. Do you know how hard I worked to make sure he never even got a hint of that chakra? Ooh. Silence. We knew Naruto was going to try and become strong, if anything just to stop the glares from the villagers. However, that desire had to be curbed. The right instructors, the right team, everything about his life was carefully scripted to make him loyal to anyone that would actually give him the time of day, something that was going to be your job when he turned 18. Instead he encountered you. You met him early, and because of that we lost our best ace in the hole. The Toad Sage could only look up at the old man in confusion. A plan? What fucking plan? What you? I am the professor. Have you forgotten I must preserve the leaf at all costs? Naruto contained a power that could keep us safe until his death. One childhood, one life, for an equal length of peace. How could you? The same way I banished Orochimaru, the same way I chose the fourth, and the same way I killed the Uchiha. I did everything with a purpose, I acted in accord with the only way I saw it unfolding. Now get on your feet and get cleaned up. Now that Naruto is no more we have to take steps. The Hyuga heiress will be unstable when she learns of his death. One more person we can't control. Then there is the one-tail container. You have to prepare a seal to deal with him before shoring up the defenses of the village. The man's mind was a whirlwind. What was his sensei planning? Why? Because of the invasion, of course. Unknown to both, a tendril of shadows had been creeping ever closer to the duo from the cavern's edge, seeming to linger just long enough to hear the exchange before it seemed to just burn away in the noon daylight. The voices once more became a babbling torrent, thousands of individuals speaking, yet also learning as a whole, a great cloud of darkness, threatening to bubble up from their home and consume all around it. Outrageous. Disgraceful. Shameful. Contemptible. Loathsome. How could a leader conspire against his own like that? What does the human's mind show? Neglect and a sorrow that is close to those who would walk our path. What will be done? What can be done? The human has fallen, only the walkers can enter and leave freely. Summons. Yes, summons. They blur the boundaries constantly. But not the toads. No, shameful they have become. They will fade, as do all things. Our reflection, the stream. It is the only way. The human is touched. Will it consume the human? No. No. Even the stream will fade. If consumed the human returns to us. The choice is made. Yes, the choice is made. Bring it, bring the human. Naruto could only watch in mild horror as a section of the great walls collapsed outside the village, as a great tide of nothing came washing over the area. Buildings crumbling and fading, people consumed silently, even the little raiment stand he had been sitting in, the closest thing he had to comfort here, didn't stand a chance as he was swept away, yet even as he opened his eyes again, he understood that he wasn't really dead, just not here. He was, as they said. Nothing, yet also everything. This tide had begun to pull him apart, but also spread him, make him a part of everything that was in this world. It was surreal. And even as this realization seemed to dawn on him, as he was ready to fully give himself to it after what had to be hundreds thousands of years, as his form started to blur into shadow and nothingness. The voices became more distant. He felt himself suddenly being rebuilt. He still was himself, though a little taller, a bit more filled out, though a part of him understood that he would still have his odd skin tone, his strange hair color. He only hoped some of the things he actually liked about himself remained when it was all said and done. Why did you bring me back? I was almost free. This time, rather than 1,000 voices speaking, they acted as one, a booming cacophony that, had he been his old self, would have driven him to his knees in pain and fear, but now, strangely, it was all just gone. That is not your path, human. Why? Your leader, your people manipulated you. Why do you care? You said that all things become nothing. If that is so, then that is his fate as well. Yes, we are the inevitable and the eternal, all and nothing. However, those that have used us in the past and returned to us had left impressions, and while few of those were what you would consider to be good, there is an order to things. Even the darkest parts of nothing, the most twisted, are still part of a whole. You, human, were manipulated and used. It was against the unity, it was an affront to us. I see. What will you do then? We cannot send you back. However, there is an option. Through summons, you can breach the walls of the realms, become a walker, one that can use and bridge those that have yet to join us, be it through their power, of the power of those they serve. The former blonde cocked his head slightly. What summons? I will not use the toads, not after what that man tried to do. The voices roared, no. Such weak, ineffective creatures will not be yours. We will open the portal, and through the stream they will choose you first, and the gifts you will receive. The team nodded. I understand. But I must ask. Why send me back? To teach those the proper cycle, you will be our herald. Teach those that will listen of the true path. That everything will one day end and return to nothing, the plane of shadows. Will they listen? It does not matter. In the end, all will return to nothing. For those that listen, it will ease the passage and hasten the unity of all. With another nod, the world of darkness and shadows tore open, and an oddly soothing pale green light enveloped him. Currently, the gathered masses of Konoha were milling about. Several days before it had been circulated that there was an important announcement. First, the Anbu had been mobilized and currently had the village on lockdown, despite the fact that there were a number of foreign and domestic dignitaries, not to mention the foreign ninja teams, and even cages had been in the village. The atmosphere was tense, to say the least. What do you think Hokage-sama has to say? Really, forehead, you don't know? It's been spreading all over the village. Apparently Naruto vanished. He'd been training with his sensei he found, then up and disappeared one day. Rosette looked to her friend in confusion. What? But Kakashi sensei, Hizu. The blonde only snorted. Really, Sakura, I know you stopped paying attention to everything else, but why did you stop listening to gossip, the only real truth in a ninja village? Moreover, I am Ino Yamanaka. The queen of gossip. Ino. She seemed to stiffen before giving a small apologia smile. Sorry. But I heard from one of the nurses when we went to visit Lee-san that your sensei ditched Naruto to go train Sasuke-kun. Not that I can really blame him for wanting to drop a looser, but it was still pretty harsh. From what I understand, he got some brat's private tutor to try and teach him, but even that fell through. So where has the baka been for a month? The blonde shrugged, a hand giving a flip to her long bang, code for Sakura that Ino really didn't care. No clue, but now the rumor mill says he's up and vanished. No one know where he went. Now we get this strange announcement. Well, it can't be a coincidence. Now her interest was piqued, something that even her former sensei Iruka would be weary if she had been banned from the academy library after the last time, when she had been searching the racks for a fighting style that would complement her rather petite physique. She hadn't had any luck. Hey. There he is. SHHH. A discreet pair of hand signs, a small pulse of chakra, and a loud booming voice, minus the giant head, citizens of Konoha, Chunin hopefuls, honored guests. Prior to this final week before the competition, it is my sad duty to report that 2 of the upcoming competitors will have to be withdrawn from the competition. First, the young genin from Sound, Dosu Kanuta, was found dead. Foul play was suspected and it is being investigated. A hushed murmur rolled through the crowd, one in particular, a boy with a spiked ponytail, sighed. Though the Hokage's sad sigh was what really caught the attention of the crowd, the second and the reason I have gathered you all here today is the loss of one of our own. A young man who I was quite close with, though I am ashamed to say that most of you will now never get to know him as I did. A child whose strength saved us every day simply by drawing breath, and one who was a cherished son of 2 of our most prestigious, not to mention powerful ninja. The godchild to 3 of my own students, and one who was said to be able to change the world. The crowd was silent. For a moment people had images of the Uchiha, wondering what may have happened, but most knew that the boy didn't have any godparents. Sakura and Ino could only look on in confusion, though out of the corner of her eye, the Rosette spotted two civilians weeping openly, the older and larger man cradling his daughter. Two owners and operators of a little raiment stand. Naruto's raiment stand. The child I speak of was the child of one of the greatest Anbu that we have ever known, a refugee who was the last of the greatest ally that Leaf has had in its long years. Kushina Uzumaki, the Crimson Talon of Anbu. Her husband and that young man's father was perhaps our second greatest hero Minato Namikaze. But that line alone, all hell had broken loose. Do you know where you are, child? Nowhere. An amused, almost tittering giggle drifted to him from the edges of his he couldn't say vision. He had expanded well beyond such small concepts, perhaps consciousness. Yes, that was the best fitting. From those edges he spied a hit of red hair, a woman it seemed, though she was not alone. Where the plane of shadows had held voices, pale reflections. Cold. Emptiness. You're wrong, that last place, it was the reflection for those that, well, believe they have nothing. Due to so many conflicts in your world, it is the closest to the surface, it's why that crevasse exists. Though yes, I suppose they're right, in time all things will fall there, but it is very far away for many of us. Who are you? Again, the laugher rang out even as she seemed to vanish before the voice was right behind him, whispering gently in his ear. I've had many names, some just call me mother, others ancient, still more think of me as some kind of god, but really, I simply am, much like you, now. Why, how? The voice turned sad, not pitying, but compassionate. They were not the only ones to see your life, to observe. All life flows, Naruto. And through that flow does it expand, evolve and grow. Life will continue, no matter what those shadows say. You don't have to fall into darkness if you don't want to allow it. That said, I do think that you should not stand for this. Life will find a way, and it will always push forward. To that end, they sent you to us, and with you touched as you are, well, let's just say that you have been chosen. Someone very powerful, very old has taken an interest in you. Wah. Again, the woman laughed, though if I were you, I wouldn't mention age when it comes to her, she does tend to have a temper. Before the teen could voice another question he felt himself being pulled forward again, the pale greens and bright lights of this place shifting, taking on hues of blues, whites and blacks. There, furthest away, and seeming to be a source of this presence, this intense cold, was the silhouette of a woman, quite an impressive woman, if he would take that man's words to heart. For the first time since he had been swept away by the shadows, scattered and brought here, an eternity, he felt a surface under his feet, felt whole. So, little human, you appreciate what you see. He had to crane his neck to look up at the woman, her regal form seeming to drift on invisible winds, and even then she stood at almost 3, maybe even 4 times his height. Though the light, mists and shadows still held her true appearance from him, he had a feeling that slightly smiling, though highly judgmental eyes were taking him in, like a child who found a strange bug or a shell. I cannot see any longer, only perceive. The woman started to drift again, gliding around him to take him in from all sides. I see, you truly were almost lost in that place, weren't you? Not lost, I simply understood. Oh? You think simply because you were almost one with the void that you know anything at all? So then, what am I? Temporary. Her form stiffened. You dare mortal. You know not of whom you speak. You are not worthy of knowing my name. But understand, I am the goddess of darkness and ice. Well, you think that all things will fade, that place, that you are so certain that all will fall to, is my plaything. I saw potential in you, saw that you carried a shard of hat place with you, and could be my chosen, but if you are so weak that you would fall to one simple glimpse into eternity, then you are not worthy of my aid. For the first time in what seemed like forever he felt an anger rise up in him. Oh goddess, then tell me, for what reason should I care about your aid? You have never helped me in the past. Why should I seek, or even accept you now? The swirling colors and mist seemed to freeze, all things coming to a point before a freezing wind swept from the woman, her own shadows darkening as he felt his new body freezing solid, no, freezing his very soul. Impertinent child. You think you can mock me? I could annihilate you in an instant. Then I would return to the shadows. All at once the cold stopped, the goddess seemed to simply be before him, so close he could see deeply into chilling orbs the color of glacial core. That is a shockingly good answer. You have a keen mind, despite their attempts to stunt you. Was it perhaps due to my little playground? Possibly seeing into the heart of nothingness. Those tend to put things in perspective. Naruto paused halfway through the action. It was so natural for him to do it, yet it felt alien in a way. The arching of his own eyebrow. Still, he had done it, as the being before him suddenly giggled. Where the woman from before, mother? Yes, she mentioned that had something of a melodic laugh, like the tinkling of bells. This woman's laugh carried a sharpness to it, like the shattering of thin crystalline glass. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was unexpected. You do have a wit about you, don't you? You don't seem weak, and with the new changes to you, I think I can use you after all. Though you will need to learn respect, young one. This time his eyes narrowed. You still haven't answered me. Why should I bother with you? The wind started to swirl once more even as the mists thickened. My powers are great, child. You would be a fool not to seek me out. With a look I can turn a field to ice, and if you want even a hope at utilizing your new aspects, then you will stay silent and listen to what I have to say. So you only offer power. What more could you want? Much to her surprise, the teen turned on his heel and started walking away from her. Anyone would go to exacting lengths for what she offered. So while the mother said you all had seen what my life was like, I thought what I wanted would be obvious to a goddess. She had to fight the urge to flinch. The boy did have a point. I see, you must understand, I am a higher being, the definition of power given form. I care not for power. Very well. Come. We shall talk. The last week had come slowly for all involved. The majority of the village, after the initial announcement, had been in an uproar, demanding that the ninja be dispatched to search, at the least, for the boy's remains. They hadn't even wanted to know his name. Only caring about the son of the fourth for a number in the village, it had been an eye-opening experience, most especially for the clan heads to be known for and only cared about, due to your parents, not because of any merit you may carry, to be forgotten. A loud, silencing bellow came from the aged leading, something that even had the pair of four in cage sweating, and after a moment to ensure no further interruptions, the bomb was dropped. The child's full name. If anything, this was met with an even greater tide of voices, all denying, all scathing, something that made the younger generation wonder at their parents' odd actions. Until the whole of the civilian populace was forced to their knees as a pulse of killer intent from the Combine's ninja force silenced them. The Hokage's heartfelt chastising of the whole of the village had caused breaths to catch, but none more so than when the Crimson Eyes Beauty, leader of Team 8, had stepped forward and flashed through a dozen hand signs, quickly blanketing the area with an illusion. One showing a complete family photo, as it should have been, a blonde bundle of energy held on their fourth shoulders, the pair laughing, while the woman behind them sported a grin far too close to the blondes to show her as anything but the boy's mother. It had been humbling, but nothing compared to their next order by their village leader to go home, reflect on your treatment of the presumed dead boy, and worse, tell your children why you behaved that way towards your savior and denied a father's last wish. Really, if he had had a year to prepare this event, he wasn't sure he could have done better. Though for a few they only felt unbridled rage. Namely the Kazukiage, the Toad Sage, and a handful of women and men from the village, though as with any important information, when it had disseminated further into the lands, there would be that many more that demanded answers. The teen could only look to the being before him in awe. Even with all he had seen here, she had seen so much more, helped to save whole worlds. Hinda made the whole I saved the village just by living bit a little less impressive. So this Yunashi had to go through some meditations and make it through temples to be allowed to summon you? Yes. But other times people had to find something called materia, a kind of crystallized power, and other instances they had to prove loyalty or exhibit qualities that you found desirable, like aptitude for cold or maybe healing. Indeed. Despite how I may seem to others, preserving life is important to me, as it is to all the higher beings, even Diablos. After all, if everything is dead, we would have no followers left, and that diminishes us. Not to mention you mortals can be ever so entertaining to watch that same laugh echoed through the plains, seeming to both shatter and rebuild this world of ice. Yet this time you have come to me. Her voice seemed to harden. Don't make yourself out to be more than you are. You have a part of my realm within you, that is all. And an amazing wit. And an amaz. Don't use my words against me. The teen chuckled, the sound seeming far too old for one as young as he actually was. My apologies, however, this still raises the main point. Yes. What you desire, I am no temptress, child. I have no taste for enticing, but to those who are in the right, well, let's just say I make exceptions. That caused another strange occurrence with him. He smirked. Felt a bit odd. I see, and how does one earn this right? I must admit I'm curious. I know how the others have in the past. What would you have of me? For the first time with the figure the darkness, those shadows faded. What appeared before him was a woman that would have that man on his back with a grin, that would have split his face in half at a mere glimpse of her pale blue flesh. Her body seemed to fit her status quite well. Long, shapely legs, a tapered toned waist with widely flared hips that swept a perfectly proportioned bust for her stature, a somewhat sharper face, though still soft. He couldn't explain it. Her nose was straighter, rather than curved, but not so large that it seemed out of place, with large, almond-shaped eyes that held a mirth yet also a coldness to them, and something deeper empty. Her hair spilled down her back, quite straight, but the way she seemed to hover above the ground made it drift about her. The whole of the pale blue curtain were swept behind long pointed ears, something that just enforced her alien appearance. Her clothing, if it could be called that, seemed to be both cloth and ice, leggings, accents and armlets that blended from one to the other, apparently at its own whim. Though all of it, despite her earlier statement, looked to be meant to entice. The leggings were not unlike to stockings, at least in their design, but at times sprouted armor like ridges of ice. Similarly, her arm coverings were akin to long gloves, almost reaching her shoulders, though they sometimes formed spikes, gauntlets and claws. From her wrists to the small of her back appeared to be gossamer cloth, almost invisible at first glance, a kind of caper cloth drape that flowed not unlike her hair. though for her main body well. Dancing sheets of ice danced up her hips, covering her sex almost to the bare minimum, before continuing up to race along her ribs, then curling under her arms, to sweep over the tops of her breasts to both draw the eye, yet keep them hidden. The odd tendrils of ice moved further to hug her pale throat, to make jagged lines along her cheekbones, before forming an icy tiara, 9 long spikes sweeping back not unlike her hair. Her lips, a slightly darker blue and dusted with glittering crystals, curled into a smile. "So you do like what you see." The boy felt his face heat up slightly, only a fool would say otherwise. A proper answer. Her hand came up to ghost along his cheek, leaving a sheen of frost in her finger's wake. "Now for my trials." Before she continued, he raised his hand, stalling her, causing a sky blue brow to arch. "If we are to enter into this contract, then we should do it properly. Naruto Uzumaki, at your service." The goddess gave a soft smile before giving an exaggerated bow. "Shiva. Now to earn the right to summon me survive." Before he could blink, 4 massive spears of ice formed above her hand, and he was forced to learn just how fast his new body could run. That couldn't be right. He couldn't just be gone. He said he was going to fight Niji Nai-san, said he was going to win the exams, that he wouldn't ever give up. The old man was sitting next to the bed with a tear in his eye. As much as this may have been planned, it still wasn't easy to see her devastation. "I know nothing I can say can really make the hurting stop, Hinata-chan, but I know Naruto wouldn't want you to linger over his death. He's not dead. He's just missing." He had to fight the urge to flinch as the young woman's bloodline flaring as she almost grabbed him by his robes. A woman was never one to cross. "I'm sorry I spoke too soon. I just know where he disappeared, and if he fell into the endless chasm. He's alive." He couldn't. "Hinata-chan, I know it's hard, but he would want you to push on, to grow strong and help to change your clan like you've dreamed, and I think I can help there." She seemed unfocused, staring out the window with a numb indifference. "How?" "I've sent for one of my former students, the Sanin Tsunade. With your great control, I think you would make a splendid apprentice to her." "I see." The elderly leader gave a small smile. "You don't have to answer now, she'll be here in time for the exams. I hope that you will take her up on her offer, though for Naruto's sake if nothing else. I know he would have liked to have seen you accomplish your dreams, even if he can no longer attain his." For her part, the young brunette only sat in silence, a tear running down her cheek as she looked out over the village. He couldn't really be gone. Could he? Faster? Faster. "I can't." A heavy sigh, more a purr, one that sent a fog of fine ice crystals across his form. "Oh come now Naruto, surely one is young, strong and eager as you can do better now, come on faster faster." He thought the blood would flow out of his nose faster than the numerous wounds he was sporting. "I am no temptress," his wonderfully tanned and toned ass. Now he was channeling that crazy examiner lady. He could only grunt in pain as another storm of thin, needle-like shards of ice tore into his side before it was almost instantly healed. Her will coupled with his regeneration ensured he could endure. "You know, if I didn't know better, I'd say you wanted more than a friendly spar." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly as she whirled around his form, tossing ice and shadows at the teen who was bending at angles that would make some of her old partners green with envy. "I think you need to keep your head in the game, child." The teen growled in annoyance as he ducked her fist, a long knuckle blade removing a few locks of off blonde hair before her fingers pointed down, instantly sending icicle claws at his head, making him throw his body forward before he rose inside her guard, the pair nose to nose. "I am no child." Her eyes narrowed, for a moment regretting taking a smaller form to fight him. "You have not proven yourself as anything else, boy. You have yet to land a single blow on me. Why should I bother with?" Now her eyes became wide as saucers, her breath catching suddenly as his hands found purchase on her shoulders. And his lips on hers. After a moment where the two were frozen stiff in the shock of their own actions, they relaxed, her arms coming up under his to wrap around his back, even as his hands moved to her neck and the back of her head, both desperate to get all the closer to the other. Heat and cold pouring from the two and making a dense fog fill the plain. However, while the goddess may not need to breath, he did, no matter how much he wanted to keep the feel of those chilling, yet silky soft lips, like the petals of a frozen rose. Wrenching himself away with a titanic effort, he took a great gulp of air, panting hard even as her body started to cool his. Yet, his form was doing the opposite with her, starting to melt layers of her clothing and armor, even as she held him close, her eyes burning with a cold fire as they danced over his face, glancing time and again to his lips, before searching his eyes once more, trying to understand what had happened. Passions always ran high in battle. It was an immutable fact, and when two with fight, at times, their fires will try and express themselves in a new way. Naruto smirked slightly as he leaned in, his lips ghosting over hers as he whispered. "Looks like I finally scored a hit, Shiva-sama." She smirked as she leaned in closer, letting her tongue flash out to lap at his earlobe. Almost instantly a small shell of ice formed. "Indeed you did, Naruto. Seems the next move is mine." With a hiss of her own, she took the frosty skin between her lips and nibbled, sending a shudder through the teen. He grinned as he let his hand move to rub her shoulders, one slipping under her arm to encircle her waist and draw her all the closer, his movements becoming somewhat frenzied as his tongue danced up her throat, causing a deep throaty moan to race from her up through his ear. How have you not died? None can hope to get close to me. Sensing the change in the mood, he pulled back slightly, letting a hand come up to cup her cheek, the woman nuzzling into the warmth as a thumb stroked her skin. You forget what I once held, and with it destroyed and reabsorbed, well, my power may not equal yours. Between the fox and my changes in the shadow, I heal at an incredible rate. That goes for staving off the cold as well, wouldn't you say? I don't know how she was cut off as he pulled her closer, letting her rest her chin on his shoulders. SHHH, it's alright. I know it's a little late to say it, but you know, I wanted the same as you did. I'm tired of being alone. Naruto gave her a gentle grin before kissing her forehead, sending a deeper blue over her cheeks, the blush of the ice goddess. I see, come then we will talk. She giggled once more as the duo moved off into the plain, towards where the woman had originally come from. Again you use my words against me. I use the best weapons I have, Shiva-sama. The best weapons I have. They had come from the four corners of the elemental nations, almost as soon as the information had been relayed to their respective leader. Apparently, the great professor hadn't been privy to a few things in the reign of his successor. Namely that one Minato Namikaze had set up a number of arranged marriages in an effort to help his child attain the peace that his toads had predicted. It had been only the second day of the talks, the day after all had come together to speak of the terms of surrender for those that had lost the war, and while the third had been the one to open the talks, it was this day that true peace would be forged. The blonde Jonin had made many promises. Namely the terms of trade and mission allotment for when the fourth had ascended to the position of Hokage. However, in an attempt to cement this, as it was well known that the third was already looking to the young man as his heir to the seat, they had asked for something more binding. Namely, the man's firstborn. Some had offered their own potential children, or in the case of some that were too old, grandchildren or prominent heirs to clans. The true crutch of the matter lay in whether or not the man would have a son or a daughter, but after much debate some of the finalizations had been confirmed. For Suna, if it was a boy, then he would wed his eldest daughter. If a daughter, then the man's youngest, as the laws in Sand said that only the eldest male could inherit the assets of the house. An outdated concept, but one that had been drilled into each generation and had been occurring for more than 300 years, back when those that made up Suna had been nomadic tribes. From this they offered 2 women and 2 men in an attempt to one-up their landlocked brethren. The women, one from the famed Terumi clan, well known for their unique bloodlines, the second was a daughter from the Ringo clan, who already had a daughter rapidly rising through the ranks and, rumors said, was to be groomed as one of the new 7 ninja swordsmen. The males, this time, would be from the Kajua clan and one from the Mizuki clan, though both offered great boons in the form of bloodlines, not much more was said, only that one member of the Mizuki clan was already a member of their famed swordsman. While Suna did feel a bit jaded at the thought of only offering one for the wedding, the fact that it was the son or daughter of their Kage was a plus. Aiwa, as surprising as it was believed they would be the ones that would fight the proceedings the most, seemed almost eager for the chance. It seemed that despite his rather brash nature he truly desired peace, especially after the child before him had humbled his army so thoroughly. However, he firmly stated that he would never offer up another's family without consent, as such his offers had been tentative. However, if none would be found, he insisted he would offer up a wealth of jutsu and even instructions on his own famed bloodline, the dust release. That had several of the others shifting and had left the blonde among them with his mouth ajar. This man, this Kage, was offering up his greatest techniques, something that was unheard of from Aiwa, specifically due to their hatred of the copying abilities of the Sharingan. It had taken the room a long moment to come after that offering, however, last, and potentially with the most to prove to the ninja before them, came Kumo. Their Kage had kidnapped the young man's woman, if rumors were to be believed, and he had the least reason to trust them. Their offer had been grand indeed. 3 women, including a young girl who had just had the Nibi sealed within her, who had been shortly after adopted by the Nai clan, who was willing to offer their firstborn, no matter man or woman, in addition. Last, Zed, leader of Kumo, had offered up any from his own bloodline, should they be willing, as with Linoki, he was unwilling to offer someone that was not offering themselves. The clan was their own business, but he stated firmly that if the girl or boy came to him with a desire to have it undone, that he would do all in his power to see that it was done. As to the boys, that was a bit trickier, as a number of their young men had been killed in the war and didn't have as many to offer. Again, he stated that his own line was on the table, but given that his 2 sons were already much too old for such a thing, it would fall to his grandchildren, should he have any. However, as with the elder Kage from Aiwa, he stated that should no candidates be found that he would gladly offer reparations as well, namely instructions for one of their own bloodlines, the storm release. Minato could only gape like a fish and couldn't have signed fast enough. However, now, almost 20 years later, there was a storm on move. From 4 separate countries caravans were being led, loaded to the brim with ninja, mostly the very best sensors and trackers they could muster, in hopes of finding and securing the blonde Namikaze. Should they fail, they could only imagine what would happen. And not from the leaf, no, instead it was the daughters who had been groomed from a young age, telling them of the potential of a blonde or red-headed boy they would be wed to, and after hearing the exploits of the father, the mother, and seeing pictures of the two, they could only imagine the man they had been promised to. And drooled. One of the prime instigators of this force had been one Sabaku no Tamari. The young blonde with a unique hairstyle had sent her summons off to the other 3 villages with pictures she had procured from the various stages of the exam, as well as what she thought was his coolest moment at the end of the first exam, courtesy of a video she had been given from one of the special jonin, namely the crazy exam lady as most called her. It seemed she had been in a similar boat as her sisters, and now that the truth had come out, she was in a frenzy to try and find him, mumbling something about the sweetest blood, she knew it all along and damn old goat. Suffice it to say there were a number of troubled parties, and soon the shit was going to hit the fan. Ice shattered. Darkness embraced everything. And the cold swept through the plain like a plague. He, once more, had lost track of how long he had been here. Weeks, months, it was all a blur, and at the same time meaningless, for all he knew it could have been a millennia. And he could honestly say he had never been happier. His time with Shiva, at first, had been tense. Both had been alone for so long, used, forgotten, they neither could really open up for the longest time. The first to crack had been, shockingly, Shiva herself. Honestly, the both had expected it to be Naruto, having been far younger and more brash, it was just accepted that he would be the first. However, during one of their training sessions, Naruto had been a fraction too slow, having skid slightly on the ice that coved he ground, something he hadn't done in what felt like years. He lost his footing. Her ice had already been launched. And it had thrust a 4-foot-long, 1-foot across icicle through his right lung. While he did recover, it had taken time. That kind of trauma had knocked him into a coma that she had feared he wouldn't awaken from. When she had seen him take the hit, be flung almost a dozen feet with the force the gout of blood he had coughed up, she had broken inside. This child, this boy, had been the first real contact she had had for a prolonged period aside from Nurse Snow, and even then she was forced to write off the young summoner, as she knew the grand summoning would take her life. As to Snow, well, he usually wrote her dual form, and you can't get too attached to someone who only saw you as a means of transportation and destruction. No, Naruto had been different, and when he had woken up the next day she was beside herself. For what felt like months they stayed in that little room in her palace, sprites bringing them what they may want or need while the two sat, and much like they had tried to do in the past, simple talked. At the end of it, they knew one another better than they knew themselves, and had met halfway when the other had leaned in to lay a gentle chaste kiss on one another. Now they were training, harder than they had ever done before, one intending to learn all he could, one getting her former powers back to the point she deemed them to be need. And as a goddess she never thought she had enough power. The massive black blade, extending from his fist like a great spear of darkness, clashed with her own before he spun, pointed with his left hand with pointer and middle fingers, before a small ants raced out, only to be stopped by a wave of the goddess's hand, in its wake a shield of ice catching the attack. Before the hand returned on the same path, slapping the shield away, shattering it, and sending a storm of ice his way, only a quick roll saved his skin this time as leapt from the roll high in the air and spun, from his outstretched hands, his own storm of icy spears rained down upon her. Only they never hit, instead it's as though they impacted nothing, only turning to harmless snow, as the goddess willed them to scatter. Faster. Ice, in of itself, isn't as destructive as the other elements. You need to be able to attack with such speed that your foes never had a chance in the start. Like with that girl you knew, Haku. He gave a curt nod before a rather evil grin formed on his face, something that would even set the being before him on edge. Even as the teen's hand started to move she changed. Shedding her normal appearance. With a wave of ice seeming to crash over her previous garb vanished, leaving her covered with long robes and armor that held blues and greens. From her right hand was a long lance of ice, the left sporting a buckler of tempered ice, while her head was covered from crown to nose by a helmet, one that seemed to leave her blind. One of two forms she preferred when she knew she was going to have to get in close, something that happened far too often with a teen. However, for once, this form wouldn't be enough. With wide eyes she saw him bring his hands up in a familiar cross-shaped hand sign, she had seen it before, but now she felt something was off. Kujebishin no Jutsu. Makamheimshma. Her eyes widened in mild shock, she had remembered how he had told her about the odd girl's attacks, how she could somehow step into a mirror of ice, and from there gained unrivaled speed, at least for one of her training and age. But to combine it with his shadow clones. Oh my, with a burst of smoke 24 blondes appeared, and before them was a mirror, mirrors that quickly blurred away to surround her in a dome. Now Shiva-chan, are you ready? He wanted faster, now you'll have it. From 13 mirrors she heard the same cry, Kajimane. Sensetsu Sushima. Her eyes widened, another attack from Haku, her and her big mouth. However, this was something she had trained him in, the Kajimane, shadow imitation. However, unlike that lazy clan, who only used it to make an opponent parrot the user's movements, she had shown him the true use of the technique. Shadows were a person or thing's mirror. They were never as real, but it was still a part of the original. To that end, the ancient Magi that had used the shadows had developed this technique to mimic spells that were well beyond their chosen field of study. The new results, while nowhere near as strong or as potent, still allowed the user to attain things that were well beyond themselves, and potentially more important, it allowed the technique to be altered, to become something new. She watched all around her as, rather than water as the technique's name suggested, needles of pure darkness formed around her, and what would have been far fewer, as an imitation technique was only ever 1/3 as effective as the original. The fact that 13 iterations of the spell were being used at once ensured that she would be in a world of hurt if she wasn't the goddess of that element, of course. But the gesture she not only dissipated the shadows, but shattered the mirrors, making the 13 boys fall to the floor with a sickening thud, instantly dispelling 12 of them, and letting the last and real one, who had been above her, fall into her waiting arms, careful to mind the lance and shield. That is enough, Naruto-kun, you managed to surprise me yet again, but you know a strain like that, even in this place, can kill you if you are not careful, and I'll not yet lose you to the void. Rest now, it is almost time. The team could only look at her through slit eyes. The exhaustion of dealing with the innumerable attacks, coupled with his last jutsu and spell use, was too much for him. He was exhausted, but he still felt the need to smile, his hand coming up to ghost over her exposed chin. I don't want to leave. She gave him a small smile. You must, Naruto-kun, this is not your world, and eventually it would destroy you, but rest assured, you will not go alone. She pulled the blonde a bit higher, marveling for a moment at his hair color, something that had returned to him in the course of their training, though his skin was still the same, oddly a shen shade. She leaned in close to him and pressed her lips to his forehead, causing his brow to almost instantly glow with a singular point of light, one that rapidly split and drifted throughout him, stopping along joints, forearms and hands, before an icy crown of his own formed from nothing, this one holding 8 points. Just a step below her, but still hers. Rest, my love, soon their time, and our own, will come. The week was up, the delegates were here. And Naruto was still missing, much to the ire of the officials who had come at the rumor of the son of the fourth being in the finals. Already the Hidden Leaf Village was in a poor spotlight, the 4 Kages livid when they had demanded an audience with the councils and the Fire Daemon and presented their signed contracts from the fourth, demanding to know why this information was withheld from them, and more to the point, where he was now and how had he lived. All the gathered women, who were resolute with their drive for the blonde, had wanted to know every scrap of information they could gather. However, from what they could tell from the few uncolored accounts, it was far from a happy life. Namely, only the pair from the little ramen shop could tell them any great details. Not even the scarred Chunin knew much beyond the academic or the odd outings to the ramen stand, something that the Mizukage, one mate Terumi, and promised of Naruto's, had thanked the man for before rewarding him for his efforts with a small fortune, something that had to be impressed upon him, as the man was too humble to accept it. It had taken one of her sickeningly sweet smiles, something that always put a male on edge, and a whispered "take it, or I'll kill you," for him to finally give in. 2 of the potential brides, Samui and Carrie, had taken notes. The girls, who had for a long time been conversing with one another, were glad to finally meet face to face, even if it was under less than stellar circumstances. While they had long ago become friends, hearing whispers that the fourth had indeed had a son, and as such had kept up their correspondence, it was still a trying time for the group. Still, such an odd group had never been seen before at the little stand, something that was drawing quite a crowd. A Kage, the first female one at that, and holder of 2 bloodlines, her flowing red hair, incredible figure and air, made both men and women swoon. Amayuri, a former 7 swordsman of the mist, or in this case, swordswoman. A woman possessing long pale green hair seemed to somehow fit her smaller stature, being a bit shorter than Tamari was. Sharp, narrow eyes and an angular face, coupled with her odd choice of a white cloth tied so it almost looked like ears, made her seem very fox-like, something that was off-putting to a few, but one glace at those swords had them knowing better than to mess with the Kunoichi, even if she wasn't the Mizukage's personal bodyguard. Her eyes were constantly moving, steel blue orbs that were both looking for threats, and a certain blonde. Tamari had forgotten her normal off-white dress and fishnets for a black battle kimono, something simple to move in, yet elegant, and had let her hair out of its 4 ponytails for this gathering and search, though her fan was still firmly in place, as was a bright red obi, and securing ropes for her sleeves, to keep them a bit up and out of the way. Next was a younger woman, about Tamari's age, with short black hair and pink eyes, someone that seemed to always have a smile on her face. However, the hardness in her eyes spoke volumes, as did the rather violent rebuff the girl would give any guy that dared to approach her. The brush off that was made all the more menacing by the gouts of almost poisonous smoke that would pass her lips every time she huffed at one. Her blood-red kimono and tan, Anbu-like armor was certainly eye-catching though. However, her headband, one indicating her as a member of the Iwa caravan, though none would be able to place her as the Tsuchikage's granddaughter, Kuretsuchi. The next several girls almost seemed to move as one through, clearly long hours spent working together had borne fruit. The first, a blonde woman with longer hair held in a tightly wrapped braid, seemed to be the leader, one Yujido Nai, her outfit clearly showing both her pride in her village, as she had several small cloud designs incorporated into it, as well as her fine curves, as it hugged her body closely. Her lavender body armor and coal black eyes however, usually kept most away, though looking was always free. The next of the trio was the shortest of them, but seemed to draw most of the attention. Samui Nai, her sister, though not by birth or even this arrangement was a cold-seeming woman, one possessed by an indifferent look that would be off-putting to most, though her eyes did hold a mirth. She was a woman possessing pale, almost white blonde hair cut in a pixie, the black skirt reaching about mid-thigh with a grey kimono top that almost reached the same length of the skirt and a set of red bracers. Though those were not what drew the eye, no, it was the rather phenomenal pair of breasts that dwarfed all the others of the group, as not even the Mizukage could measure up, not unlike with Amayuri. Her ice blue eyes were constantly scanning the crowds, her lips held in a small frown, though most were distracted by her slightly open kimono top, showing quite a bit of cleavage that was tightly held by a fishnet undershirt. The last, though one of the most striking, was a woman with a deep matcha skin and blood-red hair, though the thing that would hold the eye, rather than simply catch it, was the almost inhuman beauty of her face and eyes. Gently sloping cheeks, a tapered chin, button nose with bright gold eyes that were simply dazzling to those that looked deeply into them, most especially when she laughed, like she was with Tamari right now. Her garb seemed the most traditional of the trio, wearing a long, short-sleeved black dress with a grey kimono top, not unlike her teammates, boots, an armored vest and her headband acting like a bandana. They were an attention-grabbing group to say the least, something that did help with the little raiment stand's business since their number one customer vanished a month ago. Though there were some that tried to come in and act like they were good friends or long-time customers that promptly had a former Anbu, throwing cutlery at the people like a possessed woman. For the group, they thought they were going to get along swimmingly. However, before they could spend time chatting once more they had to head out to the stadium, maybe, with a bit of luck, the blonde they all sought would be there waiting. While not totally correct, they would be surprised to say the least. For one elderly Cage he was under an extreme amount of pressure. Not only had he found out that Minato had gone behind his back and set up these marriages, until the incident with Naruto was resolved to their satisfaction, all the gathered leaders had refused to leave. They had made it simple. Until Naruto's remains were found, his killer brought to justice, or evidence of his missing nin statues was brought before them, attempting to remove their representatives, his apparent wives, would be seen as an act of aggression and assault on their people. Worse yet, the Fire Lord had agreed, demanding to know why he wasn't told about the fourth Hokage and hero of the war having a son, let alone getting married. Especially considering that major official events such as that were supposed to be held in the capital, not only for prestige, but for record keeping, so that just this such an event wouldn't happen. For the first time in his long career, he was at a loss. He had never imagined that these people, most especially Cloud and Stone, would ever agree to political alliances with a Leaf. Worse yet, these women all seemed to genuinely care for the boy, something that just shouldn't be. And if that wasn't enough, apparently Anko, someone who Orochimaru had thought of as a daughter at one time, was one of these women and now was almost leading the Leaf's revolt against him. He needed a drink and his porn, with a nod to the proctor he sat back, leaving the opening ceremonies to the jonin in the arena rather than doing it himself. He honestly didn't think anyone would listen to him, most especially the 4 Cages who were currently scowling at him. Genma, a skilled ninja in his own right, could only sigh at those before him, idling gnawing on his senbon in frustration. He hadn't seen his girlfriend in a week now because of the Hokage. He couldn't blame Naruto, wasn't like the kid asked to have a shitty sensei who threw him, literally, into hell. Still, she was forced to work, scanning as best she could with her partner. He had a feeling though that when she did show up again, Kansa and Yuzuka was going to shatter his hips. She was supposed to be entering her heat earlier that week, he could only imagine what she was going to do to him when it was all said and done. Alright, with accordance to the laws and traditions of our lord, the Fire Daimyo Setagozi III, I hereby begin these Chunin exams, honored contenders, please head to the box. Also, at the request of the lords gathered here today, we will give one last chance for Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze to join us in the arena to battle one Niji Hyuga. He has 1 minute, starty. All eyes suddenly turned to the great doors opening once more, a figure in a tattered dark blue robe, though sporting an almost pristine pale blue cape over it, slowly moved into the stadium with almost pained-looking gait. The cloth seemed to move with winds that couldn't be felt by others, the baggy material utterly obscuring his physique to those looking down on him, the long sleeves even hiding his hands from few hands that just seemed to hang limply at his sides. However, it was the wide-brimmed burnt orange pointed hat that seemed to draw the most attention, a single stripe of black cloth close to the brim, helping to break the rather outlandish color. Finally the figure stood before the proctor, the man eyeing the apparent teen with a slightly cocked head. "And you are?" "Naruto, forgive my tardiness, I have been traveling for a long time." The man's eyes went wide, as did many others, though for a select number it was with wide grins or happy tears. "You know, Brad, a lot of people have been looking for you. My apologies, where I was, none could follow." He gave a shrug as he looked to Neji, the teen having already backed off as he eyed the robed figure. "Sorry to ask you, but you need to show me your face, so I know that you're actually you. You can have a sensor check my chakra if you like, but I would prefer not to give my opponent anything that could aid him in battle. That is the point of these exams, is it not? To test our limits." The man looked up to his cage looking for an answer, only to receive a small nod. "Very well." Looking around, he raised his voice, "Anbu Sensor A273, report to the stadium for a cursory check of a ninja." Unknown to most, however, for one rookie of the year, he wasn't going to give the blonde the chance. With a pulse of chakra he activated his eyes. And took a deep breath and a sharp step back. For what he saw was simply nothing. At the center of what should have been a black and white world, though with this light more white than black, was simply a swirling void, something that just seemed to consume his vision. Then he saw it move. And two glowing ice blue eyes stare at him from the heart of it. "Hyuga. Why is it that you are already beginning outmatch?" The raven-haired teen didn't answer, though the sharp look from the proctor had him twitch slightly, not enough for a normal person to spot, but to those of his family in the stands, it was as plain as day. "Like I would need to cheat against a failure. Yet that is not a denial. Why did you feel the need to look at me with those pathetic eyes?" Most of the stadium was suddenly put on edge. If there was one thing that a person didn't make fun of, it was a Hyuga's eyes. "You would dare to mock a Hyuga, peasant?" Naruto turned simply to face him, his face still hidden by the brim of his hat. "I don't recall mentioning the Hyuga, only your sad little eyes so blind to all around you." Silence. "Proctor, if he is allowed to start the match before you announce it, should I not be allowed to do the same?" Slowly the teen raised his right hand, revealing a glove that matched his hat, before those gathered in the stadium could feel the power flowing through him. "Naruto, wait, so it is a double standard then?" That made the man snort. "No, but we don't even know if you're you yet. So just wait." "Understood." He did not lower his hand, much to the alarm of those who were rooting for the Hyuga branch member. Not 10 seconds later, one of the animal masked black ops, this one with a crane mask, stepped close to the robed figure, the person's hands coming up to hover over the teen's head for a moment before stepping back and nodding. Genma returned the gesture and with a swirl of leaves was gone. "Very well. Naruto, as Hyuga Neji did not wait for the appointed signal, and with the allowances falling to me, I will allow one free technique of your choice, not to exceed the rank of his Dojutsu. However, given the fact that such a technique has no official rank, I must defer to the Hokage." All eyes went to the old man, who gave a slight clearing of his throat before speaking, seeing as the Byakugan is able to pierce all objects, allowing the user to see the best places to strike, as well as possessing great levels of insight, allowing potential manipulation of the target, not to mention being the basis of the entire style of Hyuga fighting. It has, for the purpose of sealing chakra for criminals, missing nin, and clan maintenance and restoration, been classified as an A-rank technique. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze is allowed to use a technique ranked as such against one Neji Hyuga, who will not be allowed to dodge, as one cannot dodge the side of the Byakugan. However, he may counter if he possesses the ability. That caused the teen to pale slightly. He knew that Naruto's clones were considered an A-rank technique, and while he could counter, that wasn't a card he was willing to reveal just yet. "I decline on condition." That caused all to look confused. Why would he give up a chance like that? The condition. "Proctor-san, I wish it noted in this man's record that he disobeyed the direct orders of his superior officer and his cage, that he engaged an enemy prior to the go-ahead, something that in the field could put not just him and his mission, but potentially his whole squad at risk. His reason? Fear of the unknown. His justification when questioned? Pride and belief that he is above his station." Neji didn't just flinch at that, he actually gaped and started to tremble slightly. Such a mark would be a stain on his career for the rest of his life. He would be lucky to ever make it above the rank of genin with such a blemish. It would actually be better to be crippled if not killed right now, at least then, in the eyes of his village and his clan, he would have fallen in the attempt to rise through the ranks and better aid his village and his people. "No. Kami, please. Not that." Genma was a bit pale himself. This was the previous year's top rookie, pride of the village, the cream of the crop kid. "Are you sure about this?" He was probably just curious. Wasn't it the second part of the exam that covered that? Or should those with fancy eyes be above the laws or the parameters of the mission? That took the examiners by surprise. This kid, the supposed dead last, had just worked someone into a corner with only words impressive, considering it was usually a Hyuga that was doing the talking. How about this? I will make one more concession. I will withdraw my request on one condition. What? Anything. Please. A somewhat dark cold laugh filled the stadium. Oh? You would agree so soon? What if what I asked you was treasonous to either the village or the clan? A sharp intake of breath and his eyes darting to and fro was the answer. Learn well Niji Hyuga, words have great power, greater than any weapon. Wars have been won and lost with them, people killed, families destroyed. My concession, you must give a heartfelt apology to the one person in the village that loves you more than any other. I'll not tell you who, but I will tell you that I'll be watching, and if you do not heed my request, then the mark will stand, in addition to the beating I will be giving you this day. Further, you will then sit with this person and speak with a civil tongue about why this person cares for you. But who? I will give you only one hint. It is not a romantic love that this person feels. Now then, do you accept? Yes, I have no other option. Naruto gave a curt nod, the tip of his tall hat bobbing almost comically. Very well. Proctor-sama, if you would be so kind. The man looked at the boy with a ting of respect. Very well. Round 1 of the Chunin exams. Begin. Did you see that? I've never seen someone so utterly beaten down just with words. He had that kid's entire life in the palm of his hand. I know, imagine if he used that kind of mind in a diplomatic setting or a torture session. Damn, don't say that too loud. Ibiki may just try and snatch him up before he even gets the vest put on. The Chunin let out a bark of laughter as he nodded. No kidding, could you imagine 2 of those guys running around? His partner shuddered. Hey, don't even joke about that. Anko's bad enough. Hey. She's not like that, you baka, you know what I mean. Oh, now shut up, fight's about to start, though it looks like the Niji kid's about to wet himself. For one blue-haired girl sitting a aisle in front of the 2, she could only give a small smile, her shattered world slowly piecing itself back together as she realized this may just be her Naruto-kun. The mage took a careful step forward, causing the ninja across from him to almost instantly take one back. Come now Hyuga, you're not good at range, I know that much, don't fear me, I promise not to take your life before you have your conversation at least. Who, what are you? You didn't even seem to be there when I saw you with my eyes. I am what I am, Niji, I am what the village made me, a being of shadow and cold. That made the teen, and several more that could hear, shudder. How only the Nara circa. The bark of chilling laughter, something that sent an odd thrill up a few women's spines. The Nara, they were far too lazy to truly master shadows. They have their silly little grabs and strangleholds, nothing more. No, their greatest weapons are their minds, not unlike how I showed you just now. No, what I am is just so much more, but enough of this. We are here for a contest of skill, and if you will not start. That same hand that had been leveled at him suddenly clenched into a loose fist. Almost at once mist started to swirl around him as his chakra pooled. Then with a brilliant flash he held his hand aloft, a long crystalline staff hovering above his palm. After a moment of the thing lazily rotating, he let another pulse of chakra race up his arm and out his hand, making a deep pitch black gem appear at the head of the thing. What is that? It seemed to simply thrum with power. A mage is nothing without his staff, don't you know that, don't you read? A mage? I guess you don't, let me demonstrate. With a flourish he snatched the staff out of the air, twirling it about him like a quarterstaff before he leveled the black head towards the raven-haired teen. In an instant a great spike of ice formed, then 2 other smaller ones as the back of his right hand glowed a brilliant bright blue blizzard. Niji bent back at the waist, dodging the spears with ease, but when they impacted, piercing the wall with impunity, he saw the surrounding stone suddenly freeze, then shatter along with the ice before falling to the ground. Ice jutsu. Wrong, but if it's jutsu you want. Raising his hand once more, the staff levitated above him before his hands come together. Shadow clone jutsu. Niji could only cringe as 4 more Narutos appeared beside him. This was going to be a long day. That's not possible. Naruto baka with ice. Rosette suddenly felt a hand on each shoulder, 2 very different hands. Now who, little one, are you calling an idiot? Both the girls, one blonde one pink, turned to look at those behind them and almost instantly cringed. There, looking down on them, were the crazy examiner from the second stage and girl with short black hair that had been with the odd group looking for Naruto. The serpentine special Jonin leaned in almost disturbingly close. I remember you, the so-called Kunoichi of the year. I hadn't realized that the academy standards had fallen so far. Why, when I graduated they took us to the prisons and we had to race, battle, cheat and trick our ways to the death row sector and eliminate one, then return with proof. Then again, we had slightly better motivation. Oh? And why was that, Anko-chan? Well, Kuro-chan, the first prize was the right to have a sensei of our choice. I chose Kushina-sama. Later on, before Orochimaru claimed me as his apprentice, I was offered the same contract you all were if she had a son. Of course, you have no idea how happy that thought made me. They already were like my parents, so making it literal, well, I would have done anything. Didn't hurt that they were both hot as hell. Oh, you like girls too? Oh course, they broke us of little worries like same-sex relationships back in the academy, never knew who would be sent out to seduce. Though between you and me, Guy-san took to those tights of his a little too quickly, if you get my meaning. That caused a pair to laugh and a cry of youth to come from across the stadium, earning a thumbs up from Enko. Guy was good people, just nuts. However, judging by these two who I heard had a double knockout of all things, your village has really fallen and you're honestly surprised. Look what the old man did to us, did to Naruto-kun. That little comment seemed to be the breaking point for Sakura. Hey. You can't speak that way about Hokage-sama. He's you. The hands gripping her shoulders suddenly squeezed hard, sharp nails piercing her skin even through her clothing. That man, little girl, screwed over all of us and Naruto-kun, something you would know if you stopped to think about it. You think he wanted to eat ramen every day? You think he liked sleeping in that rat-infested dive? She leaned back to Kuretsuchi for a moment, seeming to forget Sakura for a moment, and her slowly staining outfit that collapsed 2 days ago by the way, place was supposed to be condemned even before Naruto-kun went to live in it. That made the two women, and those sitting next to them, look to the robed figure sadly, a figure who was currently testing the Hyuga's flexibility by sending waves of ice at the teen, even as he was slowly circling, making the raven-haired boy's attempts to close the distance seem utterly small. So what? He's still the dead last. Now she really did cry out, as those fingers dug all the deeper. This time it was Kuretsuchi who leaned in, a disturbing heat coming from her lips. Yes he was, and look at him now, seemed that boy, with more experience and purer blood, is about to be spanked like a small child. Kami, I can't wait to see what those clones can do when properly applied. That made the two older women drool as Sakura was forgotten, the girl limping off while holding her shoulder as she shot daggers at the two with her glare. Oh yes, they would be testing his limits indeed. While none could see it, Naruto's eyes were narrowed in annoyance. He had already used up more chakra than he wanted to with these ice spells, and now the teen before him was managing to close in and deal with the clones he had created. Up one gone, and he got a new appreciation for the Hyuga fighting style. Those little pokes and jabs hurt. He had heard the collective gasp from those involved when the clone was struck, apparently they thought that was the real him. Not even close, and even if it was, that's what a substitution was for. With a sigh he drew the staff back further and, with a careful set of signs that had never been seen by a ninja before, began to chant quietly under his breath, making sure that his remaining two clones were between him and the clan member. Instantly the man was running at him, rather surprising speeds to be honest, though his training from Shiva wasn't for thing. Even as he dashed in, a number of ice spikes erupted from the frozen ground, even as the second clone was starting another spell, quickly bringing another barrage of ice spears to bear. Having taken a clue from Shiva herself, he had made a number of ice shields around the original, making sure that the only real approach was from the front. He knew this was going to be a low blow, but he knew he had to end this much sooner than he would otherwise like. Now it was time to show what spells were really capable of. Niji was at a loss. These spells. Yes, that's what he called them. These things had been coming at him in an almost constant stream, never giving him a chance to really think or formulate a plan. Worse still, they were saturated with chakra, making his eyes quickly succumb to pain as the points of impact became supersaturated with it, making dozens if not hundreds of small blazing flares of chakra all around him. A dodge and a quick step kept Highfoot from being skewered. A spinning leap to do a handstand on one clone before he rolled, dodging the staff and gaining momentum before his foot crashed into the figure's sternum, dispelling it, but as it burst it sent out a storm of senbon-like shards of ice, biting deep into the bottoms of his feet and underarms before seeming to just burn away. With a grunt he looked up at the two that remained. The one in the back had released his staff, the odd weapon floating almost 2 full feet above his head, where it spun lazily, a strange pattern of ice appearing under his feet, even as his hands made strange wide gestures. With a growl he pushed himself forward, dashing like a madman to the duo, the first threw a punch, a great blade of ice coming from the knuckle that he easily pushed aside, across the Naruto's body, before he sent a strike into the clone's ribs and making it dispel, much as before there was a shower of shards, but this time, as he exploded, it seemed to strike the shields as well, causing a chain reaction, one far larger than he had expected, leaving him only one option. Hakashim Kaiten. He knows, no way. But that's. They did say he was a genius, yet it was his undoing. Poor Cages looked to the fair among them, staring in confusion as she leaned forward to see through the smoke. How do you mean, Mizukage-sama? Simple, Lord Hokage. That technique has always had one fatal flaw, though less so for the user, the almost total obstruction of one's vision. The four men looked back and had to agree, the sheer amount of dust thrown up by that single move had covered the entire arena in a thick blanket. The only thing that could easily be seen was the staff that was still spinning lazily above where Naruto had been standing. The largest of the group, a dark-skinned man with his bright white hair neatly in a set of cornrows, folded his hands before his face. Indeed, but I don't see how that will hinder him. Perhaps if he was with his team, then there would be a problem. You're telling me you don't understand it? kids these days. The man scowled half-heartedly at the shortest of them. Oh? You couldn't feel the amount of chakra down there? That is still there? He snorted, I'm a fighter, not a censor. This time the veiled man at the end, next to the third, opted to speak, keeping his eyes focused solely on the fight. Obviously you need to train in other areas my lord, with the amount of chakra young Naruto-kun has filled that arena in, using his eyes could just blind him. Right now he has to wait as much as Naruto does, for the fog to lift, as it were. But Tsuchikage could only shake his head, again, you are wrong. With the staff still marking his position, one quick hop is all that boy would need to see where his foe was. It's a foolish mistake on the Namikaze's part. Irideed smirked, pale blue lips being moistened slightly as he tongue darted out, and less. Micro-pulses of chakra flared before him, his hands a blur as he used them to clear his path. Then he spotted it, the silhouette, one last pull on his draining reserves, and he was ready. As it flowed through his body the area cleared around him, you are within my field of divination. All eyes in the stadium widened, there was no way. 2 palms. That was as far as he got. His fingers impacted the cloak, then went straight through, striking nothing. Thrown off with a lack of impact he spun, expecting to see the blonde before him, yet all he saw with the rope blowing away, showing a foot-thick column of ice supported by the hood and hat. Then he felt it, an almost gentle touch at his right shoulder blade, an icy breath at the nape of his neck. Now then, Niji Hyuga, I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen. Right now I have my right hand on your back. This spell is perhaps one of my favorites though far from the most powerful. It is known as the Umbral Touch. When used it surrounds my hand with raw shadow, the dark power that will one day swallow all things and return it to nothing. This spell is very close range. If you were further than a few feet it would be worthless, but thanks to you and your little dance well. What will you do? He let out a sigh, sending a chill up the teen's spine as he felt the 2-finger dig in a little deeper. That's all up to you. You can surrender now and I'll cancel the spell. Or you can try and get out of this and I'll pierce through your shoulder, your lung, really your whole body. After that, the real effect will kick in, the shadows themselves will snake throughout your whole body, robbing you of your strength and your vitality. Now I'm told this is only a temporary effect, maybe a week, assuming you survive the strike of course. It's one of the reasons I love this attack. You see, even if I only nick you, you're finished now, choose. The teen glanced slightly over the threatened shoulder, seeing a hand that didn't seem to be there. It was as though the blonde had summoned the night itself and had wrapped his hand in it, the substance seeming to churn and pulse on its own, snaking up Naruto's hand and arm like a living creature, but never going towards his shoulder. Apparently he did have full control over it, even if it was resisting. Alright, cancel it. He pressed in closer, making the Hyuga wince. You think me a fool, child? Say it. He Proctor, I surrender. The crowd was stunned to silence. The cricket chirped. The tumbleweed blew. And one blonde moved forward to the pillar after pushing Niji to the ground, seemingly disgusted with the teen. However, just as he was taking up his robes once more a cry of "Don't you fucking dare" sounded. For the blonde, he could only look up in mild confusion as he saw not the crazy purple-haired woman and certainly not Shiva. He hadn't summoned her yet. Instead, he saw 2 women seated on either side of the weird proctor woman and another girl a bit older than him with short black hair. It was these 2 that called out. One with long pale green hair and a platinum, almost white-haired blonde with a rather shocking figure. They were the only ones to voice it, but from what he could see several of the girls had the same thought. Though it didn't mean much to him, he had remembered Shiva saying she had liked how much he had changed. Where once was a rather scrawny, if tanned, short blonde boy, looking far younger than he actually was. Now stood a boy that had apparently set a number of the women in the stands to drooling, but disturbing really, he knew he had grown several inches taller, maybe even a foot. He also knew he had filled out, though it was streamlines, more like some of the swimmers he'd seen in wave that went deep for the pearls. His shoulders had bulked up a bit, his abs were now clearly defined, and his arms and face had purged their fat long ago. Shiva was quite demanding in her training. Further, where once he had nicely tanned flesh, now he had pale, almost ashen skin, the teen looking very much like he needed the sun, and really he did. Though the other thing that seemed to draw their eyes were the marking he now possessed. They started mostly at his collarbones, then down his sternum, ribs and abs, none of them very big, really most were little more than a hair's breadth, but the intricacy and patterns they formed as they traced ribs and muscles were something that Shiva had taken great pains to trace one night. He was more than happy to see where her own crystal-like marks went. Giving a slight shrug, one that made Ino faint, while Hinata was hyperventilating, he took back up his hat and placed it on his head before turning to the competitor's booth. The last thing they saw before he vanished into the small tunnel was a set of glowing glacial blue orbs, things that truly did not seem like eyes, only markers where a head should be and promises of a power deeper than they could ever know. Chapter 2. seeds. Silence continued to permeate the stadium up until the blonde had finally disappeared from view, though almost as soon as the last wisps of blue were out of sight, the spectators erupted in applause, though none were so loud than a certain, select group of women. If he were anyone else, if he was his old self, he would have been whooping and hollering, leaping into the air in joy. Instead he only possessed a form of detachment, one that truly seemed odd for one of his supposed age, mostly due to the fact that he was lost in thought. Why was he moving up to the fighter's box? He had finished what he set out to do, truly he didn't even remember most of the faces that had been cheering for him. He'd remembered Niji, as that was his prime focus. He remembered the old men, the sources of his pain, yet also those that lead to his love. Well, that wouldn't be enough to keep him here, it would be enough to stay his hand. You were almost late. The blonde was brought out of his musings as he turned his head to the brown-haired teen before him, one with spiky hair and half-lidded, lazy eyes. The boy could only shift uncomfortably as he was stared at by the blonde for several long moments, the act setting his mind to motion. A wizard is never late, nor is he early, he always arrives precisely when he means to. Shikamaru could only blink owlishly for a moment, part of him trying to decide if this young man, who had at one point been his friend, was just messing with him. The debate ended by the small smirk he saw from under the hat. Troublesome. Naruto stiffened at that, the word seemed so familiar perhaps. The pineapple-haired teen could only give his own small smile at that, but still, he felt he needed to ask, well, it's too troublesome to really bother. What was that? That attack, the umbral touch. I already explained it, and I'll not repeat myself among those I cannot trust. That put a frown on the teen's face. You can't trust me? Glowing blue eyes, simply boring into his own, were all he got for an answer. It seems your illustrious Uchiha is a no-show Hokage-sama. The aged fire shadow could only scowl, cursing the boy and his sensei. He never should have okayed the Jonin's plan for training Sasuke. If he'd put his foot down at the start, then none of this would have happened. Sasuke-kun sensei has always been known for his lack of punctuality, however it seems as though the student has opted to follow the master. The Kazekage looked down the row of shinobi with an invisible frown. Normally he would put forward a postponement, but with the gathered cages here, and learning that his own godson was still alive, well, his plans for an invasion were looking quite bleak to say the least. Then I would say it was quite the boon for you that the Namikaze has returned to you, lest you village be seen in such a light, though I am curious about. Where is the boy's headband? 5 sets of eyes widened as they turned back to the robed teen. After a few moments of scanning his body, they all came to the same conclusion. It was no longer there. And for a few this actually brought them hope for something more than just a political marriage with Konoha. The hairs of the 5 cages prickled slightly as the proctor body flickered in, quick to lean down and inform his cage about the no-show, and to ask for instruction. As much as it pains me, Sasuke had his chance. I cannot show favorites here. Genma, make the announcement. Perhaps you shouldn't be so hasty, Sarutobi Dono. I'm sure you can feel the air here. There are a large number of people who have some just to see the match between the much vaulted last Uchiha, and my son couldn't an exception be made. Orochimaru suddenly felt terribly uncomfortable having 4 cages' eyes boring into his own. Lord Kazekage, I would think that you would be happy having your son advance without having to give up his techniques. Indeed, Reikage Dono, however, I need to showcase Gaara's power in order to get the missions my village so desperately needs, and while this slight to Konoha will certainly help in that regards, it's hardly a match for having our best shine, wouldn't you agree? That made 3 of the occupants of the booth give small murmurs of concession, though Inoki looked far from convinced. Younglings no respect for how things are done. We learned the hard way in the last war, Sarutobi, that if you're late you die. If you allow this pandering, then you are setting a terrible example for your ninja, and I know my Kuritsuchi would never stand for someone under her simply deciding to be tardy. That earned a round of nods from Mei and A. He has a point, Hokage Dono. Well, this is your exams to host, it would set a bad precedent. Sarutobi bowed his head slightly in thought. Mei had a point, and considering the miraculous appearance of Minato's son, they wouldn't be hurting any time soon for clients. You all make good points, however. As you say, Mizukage Dono, the decision is mine. Genma, make the announcement. Sasuke Uchiha is to be disqualified. Perhaps this will teach him humility in the end. With a small nod, the Jonin shunshine back to the heart of the arena, sending a slightly bored look to Gaara before speaking. Unseen to all was the tightening grip on the Kazekige's chair. Well, that is certainly surprising. Shikamaru arched an eyebrow slightly at the half-whispered comment. What? If they're not here, they're disqualified. One of the few untroublesome things that will happen today. The burnt orange hat bobbed slightly, indeed, but considering how many concessions have normally been made for the boy, one would have thought that they would have postponed things. I have a feeling that the other cages had a hand in this. It was too troublesome to nod, but before he could comment, a cry of "I forfeit" came from the one in the cat-like jumpsuit. Part of Naruto wondered if the ears actually served a purpose. Troublesome, why do I have to face another girl? Maybe I should forfeit as well. Naruto's head tilted slightly as he watched Gaara run through a few scenarios in his head, though their attention was quickly drawn to the arena when Temari, with an impressive display of her apparent element, rose her fan to the ground like a glider. The woman then, with a flourish, snapped the large weapon closed before sending a vicious smirk to Shikamaru. And, much to the two males' surprise, a saucy wink to Naruto, how troublesome, do you know her? No, not that I recall. So no hints for your old friend, eh? None. He let out a long, drawn-out sigh as he half heard a taunt from Temari, his eyes turning to the clouds for a moment, best get this over with. As the pineapple-haired genin moved down the steps to the tunnel, intent on taking as much time as he could, Naruto's thoughts turned inward, specifically to one woman in particular. And unknown to him, Shino stiffened slightly, his insect starting to shiver within him at the feel of the suddenly frigid chakra that started to grow within the blonde teen. For Naruto, this was something of a novel sensation, delving into one's own mind. Not unlike the feel of vertigo one may experience while lying in bed sometimes, that little sense that your body is shutting down without you. It was surreal, even at the best of times, or when one knew it was coming. As his eyes slowly drifted around the expansive space, one of utter void and all-consuming cold, he felt a set of hands slowly wrap around him from behind, both running across his chest, before one ghosted up to his face to cradle his cheek. Shiva. A soft murmur of contentment could be heard next to the shell of his ear, before a shockingly warm pink tongue gave a playful lap to the bit of flesh, almost at once causing a small sheen of ice to form. Naruto himself let out a slight groan as he turned to claim her lips as his own, the two sharing a long kiss before Naruto turned in her grasp, his hand snaking around her waist to hold her close to him. What calls you here, my love? Shouldn't you be observing the matches if you wish to continue? Of course, personally, I feel it's a waste of time. You hold no allegiance to this place. He gave a small nod, his head coming to rest on her shoulder. I know, though some part of me still feels an attachment to this place. I can't weigh why. A small laugh from her chilled his neck as she nuzzled him affectionately. Perhaps it's that soup you love so much. That caused a throaty laugh from the teen. Maybe you're right, we'll have to get some before this is all over. Beyond the veils of darkness a slight buzz could be felt by the duo, something that caused an annoyed grumble from two throats. Seems our time here may be over sooner than we like. You know what we're doing after this, I trust. Yes, we go in search of the next your sister. And all but blood. Go, and summon me soon, it's been too long since I've tasted fresh air. He gave another smile, leaning in to steal a chaste kiss from the goddess. They couldn't stop me if they had to, my love. But that he faded, leaving a small blush on her cheeks and a warm feeling in her core. They couldn't if they had to. Two glowing blue orbs cracked to show Naruto a stunned-looking stadium, the crowd staring down at the arena in utter bewilderment. There, at the heart of it, was Shikamaru and Temari, the duo locked in his shadow bind. However, from the shocked look on the blonde's face, it seems the outcome was not what everyone had expected. Well, save for the laughing Chaoji. Let me guess, he gave up. Shino gave a small nod, the brown-haired teen trying not to feel jealous of the match. He was wanting to showcase his own skills. No matter how much he seemed emotionless, he had just as much riding on this as anyone else. Seems it will be my turn once more. Not waiting for the genius to return, Naruto moved down the stairs and back through the halls, giving a nod to the shadow user before he stepped back into the light. He vaguely noted the number of people that leaned forward in anticipation, though once more the cheering from the small grouping of women in the stands seemed to outshine anything around them, earning a confused look from the blonde. Odd, I wonder who they are to cheer me so adamantly. Admirers perhaps. Not likely, you know the number of people that would cheer for me already. True, but you were gone for a time and as they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. He smiled slightly, unknown to the onlookers. True, but I have no memory of any of them, so their feelings are moot. The goddess frowned slightly within her realm. That's cold even for me, Naruto. Yet not untrue. I have never met these people, and they know nothing of me, so if there is some form of affection, then how can it be real? Not for the first time she was forced to accept his logic, though she didn't have to like it. She knew that he would listen to her, but at the same time, would he be open-minded enough to accept the other summons when he acquired them? Or would it take another eternity like it had with her? True, but perhaps they are eager to get to know you. A moot point when we leave. She let out an annoyed sigh. Naruto, do you trust me? Without question. Do you love me? With all that I am, where are you going with this? Then please. Keep an open mind. You are no longer a part of the natural world, and with that comes some perks, ones I'm hoping to share with my sisters. Shiva, I know you love me, and that is something I will never forget and will forever cherish. However, I want to share that joy with those important to me. Will you allow that? The teen could only frown even as he looked across the way at Gaara. The red-headed boy looked to be saying something, something that he couldn't bring himself to care about at the moment as his mind focused on the goddess. I can try. That is all I ask. Why is he just standing there? I'm more concerned with the fact that that kid from Sand is waiting as well. It's almost like they're studying each other. Anko felt a bead of sweat run down her neck. She had seen the aftermath of the psychopath from Sand, and Naruto was currently in his sights. Add to that nothing she had seen from the blonde would be of use against Gaara, and she couldn't help the level of dread that was welling up in her chest. Kuro-chan, I've got a really bad feeling about this. A stone ninja looked surprised at that. This was the most serious she had ever heard the woman sound. Hey, I'm sure it'll be okay. They won't let the matches get too carried away. The purple-haired jonin could only give the brunette a deadpan. Kuro, there were 2 deaths in the preliminaries, almost 4. This is no game, and Gaara killed 3 alone in the Forest of Death, according to a few witnesses before almost killing his opponent in the prelims. That made more than a few sets of eyes widen. Most didn't know of the genin's brutality, but those that had been present could only watch in grim fascination as Naruto simply seemed to stare at the kid. Slowly, as the seconds ticked by, the crowd began to grow restless. It would seem we have another battle of wills going on at the moment, wouldn't it, Kazuki Dono? The veiled leader was leaning forward, his fingers interlaced before him. The hidden missing nin had already called off his forces. The disruption to the matches, coupled with the added cage here, ensured that he would be in a dire straits should he act, so instead he opted to err on the side of caution. Indeed strange, Gaara was never one to think out a strategy beforehand. Your Namikaze must be quite the opponent, Hokage Dono. Of course, the son of Minato wouldn't disappoint. However, does he have anything that can pierce my son's ultimate defense? Given what we have seen thus far, I wouldn't doubt it. He leaned forward himself, trying to read the mood of the fighters down below. From what he could tell, Gaara was studying Naruto closely, trying to see what he may do. However, Naruto looked to just be staring blankly forward, at least from what he could tell, almost like he wasn't even seeing the teen. Strange. Mei, who was seated to his right, turned her attention to the larger man. What? I think the boy is speaking to his Biju. 4 other sets of eyes went wide. How can you tell? The unfocused state he's in. My brother and Yujito will often have this look when they are turning inward. He may be asking what the best course of action is, but why would he need to ask? Are Gaara's skills that formidable? It is wise of him to seek counsel after all. This is a fight between my son, the host of the 1-tailed raccoon demon, and Naruto, the host of the 9-tailed fox. Sarutobi broke out in a cold sweat, a battle between Jinchuriki, at the heart of his village. He could only hope that Naruto had a plan up his sleeve and lived up to him moniker of most surprising ninja in the leaf. For Gaara, this was a new feeling deep within his mind. He felt mother stir, yet she wasn't screaming for the blonde's blood. No, instead she seemed to be feeling him, sensing the power that slept within him. Mother, you're silent, what's wrong? The boy, he has changed, he is darker. Shall I kill him? Mother snorted, a highly unladylike sound, but he would never say as such to her. Of course, I want his blood. But be wary, his connection to the dark could stop you, like when you went to kill the green one. Yes mother, he will feed our sand. Namika's mother wants your blood. Naruto, having just returned to himself, narrowed his eyes at the redhead. What did you call me? Gaara's legs widened slightly as the cork from his gourd came free, the tendrils of sand starting to dance about him. Namikaze. That is your name according to father. Naruto's blood chilled further, if that was at all possible. Through their connection, Shiva could only gape as Naruto's memories flashed before her once more. Namek is the name of the previous leader of the village. Could that be why so many of these new women were cheering for him? That they saw a connection of potential power, though a clan name. Beyond that, where were those loyal to her love's father that should have been guiding and protecting him over the years? You're wrong. The audience suddenly went silent. I am Naruto. Nothing more. At once the stadium erupted in harsh mutterings and a few protesting cries. Slowly that din grew, some saying he was a pretender, others that he was insulting his father, more still were wondering why it was that he would deny the great name of Namikaze. Very well, mother senses power in you. Will you be the one to prove our existence? Those chilling blue orbs bored into Gaara's green as Naruto's hand rose up, his staff forming once more. Existence is temporary and fleeting, all things will return to the void in time and be consumed in shadows. Shall I show you? It can be my gift to you. Shiva felt a shiver run up her spine, and she smiled. Shall I give you despair? Gaara's eyes narrowed. Your tricks won't work on me, Naruto. His sand rose before him, the tendrils sharpening to fine points. Mother needs your blood. The half-dozen spears rushed towards the cloaked blonde, said teen, turning sharply even as his staff flowed about him, small wisps of black and clue chakra dancing about the dark crystal at its head, yet still the spears came on. Suddenly ending the spin, he thrust the staff into the ground before him, aegis of ice. The redhead's eyes widened as the very air around the blonde seemed to condense a thick shell of ice, quickly creating a semicircle wall before him. Pathetic, his sand flowed, and the wall was ground to nothing. To reveal nothing. Gaara let out a low growl of annoyance as his sand began to spread throughout the arena. Namikaze. Where are you? A slight shiver of chakra, the barest breath on the back of his neck, over here. Sand exploded around the teen as he sought to surround the blonde, doing all he could turn him into a fine smear on the arena floor. Still, there was nothing. Shiba could only look on with wide eyes. There was no way that Naruto was that fast. Well, he certainly wasn't up to the level of Lee, he was much faster than when they had fought. But that wasn't it seemed as though Naruto was just winking out of existence every few seconds, like he teleporting around the arena somehow. What how? Next to him Hinata had her Byakugan activated, trying to decide if what she was seeing was real, only to come face to face with a living shadow that was Naruto. A shadow that seemed to be blinking in and out of existence. It wasn't really teleporting, it was just that he didn't seem to be there half the time. From what she could tell in those moments of nothingness, he was taking half steps around the redhead, forcing him to send attacks where he had been and where he thought he was, time and again. Amazing. Hinata. He can make high himself cease to exist. Hiba's eyes were not the only one to widen as, next to them, Kurenai's eyes sharpened, trying to see if the technique was a possible illusion, but even her keenly honed senses seemed to fail her every time he vanished. She was right, he was just not there. Impossible. Is it the Hurricane? The largest among them shook his head. No, Terumi Dono, that has a yellow flash involved, this is something new. Gaara's attacks look like they're just passing through him, is it some form of time-space manipulation? It has to be. The large man let out a small bark of laughter, like father like son. Sis, what is Nibi telling you? She's quiet, too quiet, I think she's having trouble understanding what I'm sensing. Come on Nibi, you know all the secrets out there, you can talk to the dead, what the hell is going on in there? The two-tailed cat only let out a small huff, trying to butter me up won't work kitten, unless I can actually see what's happening out there I can't help you. All I know is that he's there 1 second and gone the next. And it's seriously pissing Shikaku off. The blonde could only grumble as she looked to her sister, she says she can't tell what it is unless she sees it, useless fuzzball. Boy. Prove me wrong. The great beast could only grumble. Hold still Namikaze. The voice seemed to come from everywhere, I told you that's not my name. I tire of this game Gaara, it's time to step things up. Iridide's eyes widened as he felt a spike of chakra come from around him as suddenly the blonde appeared. Or, rather, blondes appeared. Are you ready Gaara? I'll reward your strength with consummate skill, you've seen my clones already, but you have no idea how fast we can really be Kajebushin no Jutsu. Makam Heimshma. Before each of the dozen blondes appeared a mirror of ice, the blondes' hands and forearms, at specific points, glowing a chilling blue as they stepped into the mirrors. Gaara looked on in confusion as, rather than his own reflection, he saw the image of the robed teen staring back at him. Now you will see that Lee is not the only one with speed. Gaara scowled as his sand rose around him, ready to defend as well as attack when the two felt it. The slight prickling of hairs on their bodies. A great cloud of smoke appeared in the arena, drawing most of the eyes from the ice dome that surrounded Gaara. There, the two showing a pose of preparedness, were Kakashi and Sasuke, the two with their backs to one another. Kakashi's one visible eye curled slightly into a smile, sorry we're late. Genma couldn't help the small smile that formed on his lips, not many could say they were going to put Kakashi in their place name. Sasuke Uchiha. Very well, where is my op? Currently in his match, you can go find a seat wherever you wish. Both Sasuke and Kakashi felt their blood run cold as they looked around, finally letting their eyes come to rest on the odd ice dome that held Gaara, the numerous robed figures, as well as the Ridide looking at the two in surprise. What, but that's impressive, isn't it? Young Namikaze has made an impressive showing today. Now, you're disrupting the fight, leave the arena now or I will summon the Anbu to detain you. You're disrupting an official match. Kakashi felt his knees go weak, even as Sasuke looked on in confusion. Namikaze. The fourth Hokage. He's dead. Genma grinned, here it came yes, but his son is alive and well. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock even as Kakashi looked to the robed figure with almost worshipful eyes, as sensei's son. The proctor's grin faded slightly, that was it, he could die happy now. While he didn't have anything against Kakashi officially, it was more than a little grating to have your career overshadowed by a guy that only really became famous after he got his Sharingan. He knew Kakashi was a good ninja, he wasn't about to say otherwise, but it did feel a bit cheap. You can't. That's my fight. Gaara's mine. You're right. He was yours. But you decided to be fashionably late, so now he's Naruto's. Now leave, you're embarrassing yourself in front of the cages. For probably the first time in Sasuke's life he looked dumbfounded, Naruto was the fourth son. But how? Annoying Gaara, shall we continue? I believe I had a gift for you. Iridide's eyes widened as he saw Naruto's left hands rise, primed between each of his fingers were 4 kunai, in of themselves not much, but with as many of them as there were. The sound of steel cutting through the air drew all in the stands back to the battle between the two Jinchuriki. Slowly the pile of kunai grew even as Gaara lashed out time and again against the sheets of ice, but it seemed like every time he started to make progress, the things would simply restore themselves. Finally, after expending more chakra than he would like, he sent the sand out to create a thin sheet around the arena. if he couldn't break them from the inside. Slowly the sand rose from the ground, the shapeless mass of tan gradually taking shape, then color, before a dozen copies of Gaara stood around the arena. Almost at once the copies threw their hands forward, dozens of tiny balls of sand bombarding the mirrors from the outside. It was slow, but cracks were forming. Gaara, you don't understand, do you, the futility of your actions? Tell me, what will killing me grant you? What about my life ending will validate yours? His voice was deadpan, a rough calm that was enough to put most on edge. By killing you, I prove myself stronger. By killing you, I can rise above everyone that wants my existence to end. I love only myself, I can rely only on myself. Naruto's hand slowly dropped to his sides as he looked down at the retreated teen, his focus waning and allowing for the mirrors to start cracking all the faster. I see, so that's what fuels this power I sense within you. What else is there? The bottom mirrors were finally falling to nothingness, causing a few puffs of smoke to fill the area as their clones dispelled. Just beyond that invisible veil, Shiva could feel his turmoil at what he had gone through, how he had felt that loneliness when he was abandoned by his sensei, abandoned by his teammates, and how it was all related to the boy below him. How, when he had fallen into shadow, he had cursed so many and was consumed by nothing. And how she was the one to start drawing him back out. In all his world he had 4 people he could count on, those at the raiment stand, who always greeted him with a smile, and the scared instructor from his school days. They, and herself, were the only ones that really remained with him through all his changes. Yet it seemed that this Gaara didn't even have that. You are all alone, aren't you? Your family isn't there for you, the villagers are nowhere to be found, and let me guess, your father did this to you. Gaara's eyes started to become bloodshot as his rage climbed. What could you know, Namikaze? Even my own sister is to be yours. The hat-covered head cocked slightly, something mimicked by the goddess. The final mirror was now the focus of 13 barrages, yet this one didn't seem to possess so much as a scuff. Slowly Naruto turned to see a terrified Temari, whose eyes were locked solely on her brother, as though he could change into something horrific at any moment. Are you afraid I will take her from you? What? Gaara, you don't know me, you know nothing about me, but I think I can say that you and I are closer to brothers than you would like to admit. The sand bombardment slowed. How? Simple. Your father said I was a Namikaze, yes? Then my father cursed me much as yours did. Yet unlike me, you still had a family, you had a chance that I never did to know where you came from. Shaky green eyes turned to his brother and sister for a moment before locking on to Naruto. No. You're wrong. They were just like the others. They were afraid. After some of what you did, they were terrified of you. Yes. And tell me, brother, what did you do to allay those fears? Did you try and play with them? Did you reassure them that you wouldn't hurt them if you could help it? Or did you push them away? Lash out at them after the things that your father did to you and told them? I couldn't. I think it's time I fulfilled my promise, Gaara of the Sand. What? I still owe you a gift, the greatest I can give you, a glimpse of what could come. With that, the cloaked form rose above the upmost mirror, standing atop it like a platform before his staff lifted away from him, once more coming to rotate lazily over his head, even as he started to make strange gestures with his hands. Gaara, you think you are alone, but I have seen what it is to be alone, the desolation, the inevitability of all things. Everything that has shape in this world eventually decays into nothing. Let me show you. The power swelled above him, enough to eclipse the arena with the sudden oppressiveness of it all. Plane shift, portal of shadows. But those simple words, the mirror fell. And Gaara fell into it. Chapter 3. Paragons. The crowd was still, a stunned silence lingering in the air as the gathered leaders could only wonder at the nature of the technique the blonde had used. Gaara, son of the Kazekage, was simply gone. Genma was no exception to this shock. It took the blonde turning to the man to get him to snap out of his stupor. Winner, nah. The robed figure just held up a hand. No, not yet. The man arched an eyebrow at him. Gaara isn't done yet. This technique does not kill, unless he was weak. The oddly glowing eyes seemed to smile. Gaara doesn't strike me as weak, don't you agree? You're saying no to being the winner, you know that, right? The smile was clear in his voice. Of course, such a thing would be hollow for all involved. Just wait. I guarantee that you won't be disappointed. The man pulled the rag off his head before scrubbing his hand through his hair. Look, Naruto, we already agreed to no delays. We can't make exceptions. The hat-covered head tilted slightly, even at the request of his opponent. It's one thing if it's showing favoritism on the part of the leaders, but this is my choice, to not surrender or be declared the victor, at least until it's earned. Gaara wanted to fight Sasuke. And you didn't ask if he was willing to wait. It's hardly our fault you didn't ask. But I digress, in the end it will be the decision of the cage. With an annoyed sigh, the man turned to his cage. It was his decision. The third simply gave a small wave, as though shooing away something that would be a nuisance. Genma shrugged and gave a nod. Very well, how long will it take? Naruto gave a shrug of his own. As long as it needs to. As long as what needs to? For him to find his own paragon. Another. Yes, another. But not the same. No. This one is different. Insane. Madness. He is lost to the void, yet not entirely. No. For Gaara this was new, the darkness, the cold. It was overbearing, all-encompassing. The voices, they scared even mother. What was this place? Where how? Our disciple. Yes. The one you call Naruto. The red-haired boy scowled. Him. Where is he? He is here. Yet not. No. No. Tell me. So much anger. Useless. Pointless. Unfounded. Scared. Yes, this one is afraid. The teen scowled. I fear nothing. You can't hurt me. Immaterial. All things end here. All things start here. How do I return? I must kill him. Mother wants his blood. Immaterial. Should he die he will return here to join the whole. This one is touched, like the disciple. Yes, the beasts. Beasts. This one was sent here for another reason, we can feel it, the pull. Gaara-san lashed out blindly, doing his best to find the sources of the voices, to strike them down before they could say more. He didn't know what they were, but he understood that that boy was allied with him, all the better to hurt him then. But time and again the waves came up empty, no resistance, no contact. Nothing. This place now that he tried to think he couldn't even feel the ground where am I? We are everywhere. We are nowhere. We are eternal. We are the end. But this is not your end. No, there is another like with the disciple. Yes, he is chosen. The stream. Yes, he must go until your time has truly come. The disjoint voices joined as one, a booming shout that caused the sand to thicken around his ears, lest he be deafened. We will meet again. Gaara could only gape as the darkness was pierced by a blinding light, one that consumed him and washed away all that he was. Gaara Tamari was noticeably shaken. In one fell swoop the odd blonde had made her brother, one of the most feared ninja in the whole of Wind, simply vanish into nothing, and now he was waiting, and with a smile on his damned able face. Tamari, this is bad, what are we going to do, what will father do? His hushed whispers didn't reach her, her eyes were flicking between the blonde and spot her brother had vanished from, even as her hands tightened on her battle fan. That little nothing, he took her family from her, he was going to pay. Shikamaru cast a wary eye to the blonde not far from him, pitying Naruto for his upcoming bout with her. He knew well enough that vengeance was something that ruled their world. The number of Iwa ninja that still hated Leaf were testament to that. Beyond that, his own mind was still reeling at the possibilities, shadow powers that vastly different were things never even conceived of in his clan, and his were a family of geniuses. But here Naruto was with blades, portals and Kami knows what else. How did he learn them? What did it have to do with the chasm? And why was he being so distant with his friends? It was almost like he didn't even remember any of them, just blank faces in the crowd, annoying blondes. Such a strange young man you have there, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi could only look at his old ally with mild confusion, wasn't his son just killed? But then hadn't Naruto said that the boy wasn't dead? If that was the case, then where did he go? What was this portal of shadows? Was it a skill in Aranu? And if so, who taught him? He inclined his head slightly to the Kazekage, no need to let him know that something was amiss. Indeed, Naruto was always known as the #1 most unpredictable ninja. The veiled man let out an amused chuckle. Is that so? Well, it seems a moniker well earned, Hokage-sama. However, I must ask where he learned such skills. I'm quite sure that the only one who has mastered such techniques was your deceased successor. Was it the man who trained him? Your Sannin. The aged leader cast a steely gaze to the man beside him, his long years of stealth, planning, all the battles he had survived, they were all starting to point to one thing. He'd found his attacker. The one that sought to destroy his home. A small smirk was hidden by the shadow his hat provided. This was a man that would fail. This was new, a comfort, the likes of which he'd never felt. Even with Yashimaru he was never this at ease, fearing those around him, be it as potential attackers or for their fear of him. But this was like soaking in a warm spring, but it reached so much deeper. He fought the urge, the desire to open his eyes, to see where he was, what was causing this feeling, yet he was afraid. Would it vanish if he opened them? Would he be back in the desolate desert, no one to care for him? Or worse, that endless plain of darkness? Another little one, it seems I'm becoming quite popular these days. Gaara's eyes snapped open, not at the voice, no, it was what he felt. Someone was holding him. Through the sand, through his clothing and armor, but who? Mother? The light tittering laugh filled his ears, it was so beautiful. What is it with everyone calling me their mother, though there are worse things I suppose. I've never been about to look away from the little ones. But my mother hated me. If anything, the grip increased, the warmth sinking all the deeper, settling into his belt. His eyes widened in horror. He couldn't feel it, the feeling of his mother deep down. Instead there was this woman. She wasn't calling for blood, pain. Who are you? What's happening? The ghostly hand drifted through his hair, he still couldn't see her. Was he dead? It's alright, we took the beast from you, it's been cleansed from its madness, and while it's still hardly pleasant, he could almost feel her smile. He is sorry for his part in your suffering. He did have a message, however. Tsukaku. If that's what he wishes to call himself. It's up to you if you wish to know this, though Gaara, it's about your mother. But you, again that smile laced her voice, I'm afraid that I'm not your mother Gaara, though I'm happy that you think that, I have to watch so many it's nice to be appreciated and from two people in such a short time. Do you know him as Naruto? He understood your suffering and wanted you to know peace. That's why you're here, to learn. The pale boy clenched his eyes in fists. Naruto. Tell me the message, I need to know, why did she hate me? Because I killed her. That grip returned almost 100-fold, phantom hands pulling him into the soft embrace of a woman's chest. Well, he couldn't hear a heartbeat, he could feel a thrum of pure power. One of comfort and love. No Gaara, she didn't hate you. Her hatred was of her village for forcing this upon you. Her husband tried to stop it, but the orders of his leader could not be ignored. Faced with the choice of seeing him die for disobeying orders or accepting the order, she did what she could to save her love. She vowed to protect you, with her dying breath she swore that she would always be with you. Despite his rage at being sealed and the madness of the priest, it respected her sacrifice and offered this much to you. Your sand is her legacy, mother's love made manifest. Gaara could only stare ahead at the shifting greens around him. Could it be true? Did his mother love him and protect him? If so, then why did Yashimaru say what he did? The phantom's words replayed again and again. His father was ordered, even the cages had to obey the daimyo, but why would he have want? Of course, every leader wanted a great weapon, something to secure their strength and borders. What was the life of one family, even a cages, when compared to a nation? He willed his sand to rise once more, looking at the fine grains in a new light. This wasn't the curse of the one tail, this was the love of his mother. He didn't understand it at first, the sting he felt at his eyes, thinking that his sand had strayed, like he had seen with the others of Suna in their time, but that didn't make sense, his sand never hurt him. Then he felt the warmth, the wetness creating twin trails down his cheeks. Tears. It's alright Gaara, everything will be alright now. For one lonely boy, he took the chance, for the first time, to let all his barriers fall. Within the arena, Naruto smiled. Gaara, as much as I would love to keep you here longer, there are greater forces at work. You know of the plan in that village, and before you go back there is one that wishes to meet you. But I warn you, he may be slow to anger, but once that is earned, nothing on earth can stop it. Who? He is very old and very powerful. He senses great potential in you, and should you be found worthy, well, there are very few who could stand against you. Gaara took a few moments to compose himself, scrubbing at his eyes before steeling himself, his sand quickly reforming into its gourd. You've done so much for me, please, show me this man. Gaara felt the ghost of lips on his forehead, right on the kanji for love, yet he knew, on some level, that it wasn't the voice, it was someone much closer to him. Good luck, and remember, patience is a virtue. The crowd was growing restless. It was understandable, this was the finals of the Chunin exam, and after that remarkable display there was just nothing. For the lords and ladies in the stand, they were starting to starve for entertainment. Even with the renewed betting going around the stands, things were dull. It had only been a half hour, one would wonder how they would have reacted to having to wait for Sasuke and Kakashi. For two though they were seething. Tsubaku no Tamari. And Sasuke Uchiha. For the former, she was imagining new and creative ways to disembowel the man in the area. The thought that this man had just killed her brother had easily driven away the thoughts of eye candy and marriage. For the later, he was raging at the loss of his match, but beyond that, it was the small trill of fear making its way up his spine that he hated. That dope had somehow not only won, but had made his foe cease to exist. Not to mention that technique, the speed, how had he done it? Not even his Sharingan had been able to track him. He was simply there one moment, then gone another. It was madness. Kakashi. What happened to him in that month? What did you teach him? The taller of the duo was doing all he could to maintain his cool facade, but inside he was just as lost. What had Jiraiya taught him? Sasuke, you know I didn't teach him, I was with you the whole month. The Jonin suddenly felt a chill dance up his spine. Turning slowly, he looked over his shoulder to find the grinning face of a beautiful dark-haired woman, her long hair cascading in curls about her shoulders. Oh, do tell Kakashi-san, why didn't you teach your other student over the course of the break? A ninja of your prowess surely knows a technique that would allow him to be in two places at once. While the smile was a welcome one, he didn't reach this ripe old age. For ninja, with just his Sharingan, finely honed senses were telling him to speak his next words very carefully. Well, I knew that Sasuke was going to have to go up against Gaara, and after seeing how he had dealt with Lee, I knew he would need a bit more attention. Dividing my chakra like that would have been a problem. If anything, the woman's smile grew, though the slight shadowing to her eyes were ringing a big warning bell for him. Oh my, I didn't realize that the young man had such potential to force an elite of your caliber to devote all his time, not to mention considerable energy, to his training. Is that why you were late? That you couldn't muster up the chakra to be here on time? The copy nin just gave her his patented eye smile and a small wave of his hand, like trying to blow out the embers of a fire. Kurenai was one that was slow to anger, even tolerating his book with only a look of distaste, but she valued the bond of teacher and student beyond any save for perhaps Guy. Now she found out he had ditched one of his students. Oh dear. And now Kurenai-san, I didn't just abandon him, I'd chosen Ibi. Oh, I know quite well who you picked. I was in the hot spring when the man was knocked out with one flick from Jiraiya-sama. It's a pity that he didn't do a better job. That threw the man for a loop and had Sasuke looking on intently. Naruto, the dead last, was trained by a Sannin. What do you mean? Obviously he did a great job, Naruto's power is unknown. That made the man quirk an eyebrow. Naruto was missing, presumed dead after your vaunted author threw him off a cliff. Kakashi's lone eye widened even as Sasuke scoffed, if the dope couldn't survive that day he really didn't. The endless chasm. That silenced the two. Even Sasuke knew not to go near that place. Stories were told of the lack of ability to climb out, the walls were too smooth, something about the earth disrupting chakra even beyond that, but for Naruto to have been thrown in and to be before them. What happened to him? None of us know. This is the first we've seen him since he vanished 2 weeks ago. Both turned back to the arena, watching the blonde stand still, his staff held lazily in one hand, turned into the crook of his arm and along his shoulder, much like a spearman at ease. That, however, became the least of their worries. Those oddly glowing orbs snapped back open as he grinned. Within him, Shiva perked up and mirrored his expression. The two speaking in unison, it's time. Genma-san, please step back, my opponent is about to arrive. The bandana-wearing nin quirked an eyebrow at the teen before doing as instructed. Then he felt it, the sudden weight of the power bearing down on them, it was almost enough to make his knees buckle. What's ha? It was unnoticed at first, the small grains of earth rising from the ground and forming a ball, but as it grew so did the oppressive power, yet it wasn't evil, nothing really wrong with it. It was just heavy. Still the ball grew, finally coming to a stop when it was roughly 4 foot around, the odd thing hovering for a time 2 feet above the ground. Well Gaara, you took your time. The ball suddenly burst in a great wave of sand, the particles swirling about the red head like a great storm before settling around him. All in all he didn't change much, he just seemed to carry himself differently, not quite as slouched, his eyes a bit less sunken. And he held a smirk, just a small one, but a smirk all the same. Naruto, we have much to discuss, you and I. The blonde just smiled back, but of course. Genma-san, you may wish to leave the arena, this is going to get a bit intense. Temari could only look on in shock. Gaara, her little brother, scourge of the sands, was smiling, and it wasn't one filled with bloodlust or hate, it seemed could that really be fondness. Gaara, what did he do to you? Next to her Shikamaru was thinking the same thing. It had only been dumb luck that had let the lazy nin find Gaara that day and stop him from killing Lee, being that he had been in Chaoji's room that day, just down the hall, he had felt that bloodlust and went to investigate, despite his better judgment. He may have been lazy, but he wasn't about to let a murderer run loose in a hospital. At that time it had taken all he had just to hold the teen. The young man only backing off when Guy had shown up yet again to thwart what would have been 2 murders if he was just 10 minutes later. But that man in the arena now, he just didn't give off that same feel. It had only been about an hour, what could have happened in that short amount of time? Troublesome. How would you like to start this off, Gaara-san? I think it would be a bit sudden if we went too strongly right at the start, wouldn't you say? The sand user's smirk became a smile before his eyes closed in a small nod. You're right, we'd cause more trouble than anything else, they may interfere. We can't have that, now can we? With a small shrug the staff came forward, the blonde giving it a small twirl before letting it impact the arena floor, a small shockwave of frost jetting from the butt. No, not at all. The sand which had been drifting lazily in the air streaked to the owner, wrapping sharply around his arms, his fists looking like great mallets. Oh? Taijutsu? That's rare for you. 2 larger sets of knuckles impacted off of one another sharply, a ninja must never be predictable. The blonde grinned before giving a small hum of agreement. So a melee to open with, seems you will have the advantage. Naruto quickly released the staff, against the laws of physics it stayed vertical as he made a few grand gestures, Gaara only smiling as he prepared himself, dropping his hips a bit and pulling his arms in close, a basic horse stance. The audience watched in tense silence as the blonde finished his motions, both hands having 3-foot blades of shadow, straight, like wedges of ink, drinking in the light. I believe you saw my blades before, yes? Let's see how you measure up, didn't I say? Don't be predictable. To accent his point, the redhead charged, the blonde reciprocating. Part 2 of the finals had just begun. What if Naruto neglected by family sent to Final Fantasy? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.